Good morning. Welcome to video gathering number 2. It's great to see you again. And I wanted to say, first of all, that I loved the messages that I received from many of you. I got some emails back. I also got some videos back from you, giving me some messages from you. So keep those coming. It's great to hear from you. I miss you still. I'm sitting in a very comfortable spot today. I don't know if you can guess where I am, but at the very end of the video, we'll talk about where I am sitting. Today, I'd like to read a short story. It's called The Treehouse, and the author of this story is Lois Lowry, and you may have heard her name before. She wrote The Giver. She also wrote Number the Stars. She's written a lot of wonderful books. She's one of my favorite authors. And I actually got to meet Ms. Lowry a few years back. Anyway, this short story is called The Treehouse. It comes from a larger book called The Big Book of Peace. And so it doesn't have a picture for every part of the story. So this is one you'll just have to listen to. I think you'll find it interesting enough that it'll keep your attention. There are 2 different pictures, and when I get to those, I will certainly show them to you. So this is called The Treehouse by Lois Lowry. It was a terrific treehouse, better than terrific. It was a marvelous, magnificent, one-of-a-kind treehouse with wooden walls painted bright blue. It had 2 windows with red shutters on each and a yellow door with 2 shiny brass hinges and a small brass bell that rang when you pulled a string. There was a little porch where you could sit with your legs dangling. And inside were a table, a chair, and a small rug with fringe on each end, and 2 fat pillows so that you could lie on the rug and read. You reached it by climbing a ladder to the best treehouse ever, and it belonged to Chrissy. "It's all mine, isn't it?" she had asked her grandfather after he built the house for her. "Just mine and nobody else's?" Grandpa was washing his paintbrush, and he nodded. "I built it just for you," he said. So Chrissy used her markers and made a sign. Chrissy's house. The sign said, "Keep out." She tacked it on the door, and then she took her favorite books into the treehouse, curled up on the pillows, and began to read. "Chrissy," the voice came from the next yard from just across the fence. Chrissy got up and looked through the treehouse window. "Hi, Leah," she said to the girl who lived next door. "How do you like my new treehouse now that it's all done?" "It's beautiful," Leah said. "What do you have inside?" "A table and 2 chairs and a rug and some pillows," Chrissy told her, "and some secret stuff," she added, though she didn't have secret stuff, really, but she planned to. "Can I come up and see?" Leah asked. "No," Chrissy said, "it's just for me. That's why I made the sign." Leah stood silently for a moment, and then she said, "I hate you, Chrissy." "I hate you too," Chrissy replied. She went back to the pillows and opened her book again. A short time later, she heard voices in the next yard. She peered through her window and saw that Leah's father was there with Leah. She had a wheelbarrow full of old boards and a jar of nails. As Chrissy watched from her window, she saw Leah's father prop an old ladder against the trunk of the tree on the other side of the fence. Then, after he jiggled the ladder and made it certain it was steady, he climbed up, carrying a board, and he began to nail it into place where the branches came together. He was making Leah a treehouse. Chrissy laughed to herself. Leah's father was at home because he had lost his job. She knew he didn't have extra money now for things like paint and brass hinges, and Leah's treehouse would never be as good as hers. Never a million years. Chrissy went back to her book and turned the pages while the hammering continued. That evening after supper, Chrissy stood beside the fence and looked up at Leah's finished house. She laughed out loud. It had taken a week for Grandpa to build her beautiful treehouse. Grandpa had used new wooden boards from the lumber yard, but Leah's had been completed in a day, and Chrissy could see that it was made from the stack of old weathered boards that had been in the corner of Leah's yard. Only one board remained there now. The others had become the treehouse. The house had walls and a porch and a door and 2 windows, but it had no shutters and no paint and no doorbell. The boards were crooked, and the roof had holes where the pieces of wood didn't quite meet. Even the sign wasn't as good, because Leah had done hers with crayons instead of markers. But its message was the same. Leah's house. It said, "Keep out." Leah's head appeared in the window of her treehouse. "Your house is not as nice as mine," Chrissy told her. "Not on the outside," Leah said, "but inside it's better." Chrissy wondered what Leah had inside her treehouse, but she didn't ask. For several days, the 2 girls didn't speak to each other. They sat alone in their tree houses. By the 4th day, Chrissy had finished all her books and had read some of them twice. She went to her window and called across the fence to Leah. "Do you have any books I can borrow?" she asked when Leah's head appeared. "No, our car's broken, so we can't go to the library." "You don't have any books at all?" Leah shook her head. Chrissy sat back down. She wondered what it would be like to be in a treehouse with no books at all. Excuse me. She wondered what Leah was doing in there. Finally, she called across the fence again. "Would you like to borrow some of mine?" she asked. And Leah said, "Yes." So Chrissy climbed down, stood at the fence, and handed 2 books over to Leah, who had climbed down her ladder too. "I have some bananas," Leah told her. "Do you want one?" Chrissy nodded, and Leah climbed up and returned with a banana to pass across the fence. Back in her own treehouse, Chrissy peeled and ate the banana. Then she called to Leah again. "Do you have a wastebasket in your house? I don't want to mess up my carpeting with this banana peel." Leah, looking through her window, nodded. So Chrissy climbed down and Leah climbed down, and Chrissy handed the banana peel across the fence. Both girls climbed back into their houses. Chrissy sat alone and admired her fringed rug for a moment. Then she leafed through her books again, wondering what Leah was doing. She called through her window. "Leah?" Leah looked out. "What?" "I could come visit you if you want to," Chrissy said. Leah didn't answer. "Or you could come visit me," Chrissy added. "Your sign says keep out," Leah pointed out. "So does mine." "Well," Chrissy suggested, "we could change them." Leah nodded. Each girl removed their sign and crossed out the words keep out. They wrote welcome instead. They rehung their signs. "You know what, Chrissy," Leah said, "we could use that wide board in the corner of my yard. It would go from your porch to my porch over the top of the fence. Then we could visit each other by walking across the board." Chrissy eyed the distance and the height. "What if we fell?" "It's not very high," Leah pointed out, "and if we each came out halfway and held hands, we could help each other across." They climbed down their ladders. The wide board was heavy, but when each girl took an end, they were able to lift it into place. In a few minutes, they had made a bridge between the houses over the top of the fence. Chrissy stepped from her treehouse porch onto the wide board, reached for Leah's waiting hand, and walked across. She entered Leah's treehouse and looked around. There was no rug, and the only books were her own that Leah had borrowed. But there was a bowl of fruit, a wastebasket, and curtains at the windows. The walls were covered with portraits of beautiful women, the most beautiful women Chrissy had ever seen. "I like your art collection, Leah," Chrissy said. "They're left over from where my mom works," Leah explained. "She works at a beauty parlor, and they get pictures of all the new hairstyles. These are last year's." "You can't tell. They look brand new." "My house isn't as nice as yours," Leah added. "I said it was better inside, but it isn't really." I don't really have carpeting, Chrissy admitted. Only an old rug, and I don't have curtains or a single picture on my walls. I could let you have one of my pictures. 2 even. You can have the blonde shag and the auburn blunt cut. My grandpa had paint left over. He could paint the outside of your house so we'd match, but I'm afraid we don't have another doorbell. Now that my sign says welcome, I don't think I need a doorbell, Leah said. I don't really hate you, Leah, Chrissy said. I don't really hate you either, Leah replied. They sat together on Leah's porch and looked around happily. What do you think is the best part of a treehouse, Chrissy? Leah asked. Chrissy thought. She looked over at her own house with its shutters and brass hinges. She looked around at Leah's with its bowl of bright apples and its yellow curtains. The very best part, she said finally, is the bridge. The end. So, interesting idea of bridges and being with people or keeping people out. You might want to talk about that, think about that a little bit. We're building some interesting bridges now between us, different kind of bridges than we've had before. We can't see each other in person, but we can see each other this way. I'm glad we can do that. So, have you figured out where we are? Well, we are in the 2nd grade classroom. This is the chair, and there's a couch over there that matches that Ms. Stolzfus made new covers for. You might have noticed the calendar in the back and some of the books behind there. 2nd graders, you probably knew right away where I was. Let's say a prayer before we leave together. Dear God, thank you for bridges. Thank you for ways in which you help us connect with each other. Help us to continue to find those connections and include others. Be with us these days as we are separated, and help us to know that we are living in your heart. You are remembering us, and you are with us always. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you next week on our video gathering. Take care.